Hi. How are you tonight? Welcome to the show. It's Shadow at Night Live for Monday, June the 23rd, 2025. And on the show tonight, Iran fires back at a U.S. base in Qatar, or Qatar, if you will, and a reprieve for Universal Ostrich Farm. That news came out last Friday. I shared that as widely as I could on all the platforms I have access to. But in case you haven't heard, a 30-day emergency stay was granted late Friday afternoon for Universal Ostrich Farm so they can get set for their appeal in peace without the threat of CFIA goons coming to cull their 400 healthy ostriches between now and the end of July, which is when the appeal case is set to be heard. We don't have the exact dates yet, and it's going to be all the way over in Ottawa. They've got to go all the way to Ottawa to argue this case to the Appeals Court of Canada. And I'm hoping that once we get all the dates out there, you guys in the Ottawa area will rally to the cause, get out there and show some support, just like you did for Tamara, just like you did for Pat and for Chris and for all of the other convoy members who were wrongly accused of wrongdoing, considering the fact that the convoy in and of itself was declared legal a year and a half ago. I don't understand where all of these ridiculous charges are still coming from. But then again, it is a communist/Marxist regime that we live under in Canada. So we'll get to that news in just a second. And is World War III about to begin? Well, hope not. Hope not. All of that news is coming up momentarily. I want to take a moment to show you guys this shirt. I'm not sure if I've worn this on the show before or where I got it. It seems to be a recent... Okay, here's the thing that happens to me pretty regularly, and this is not a boast or anything. This just kind of happens where people will walk up to me and give me stuff, and I really appreciate it. And the problem is it's very difficult to keep track of who gave me what when. But I thought I would wear this shirt tonight because, can you see what it... Freedom? I just felt compelled to wear this tonight. I don't know why. And if you were one of the people or you were the person who gave me this, I want to thank you very much, because I know I didn't go out and buy this. Not that I wouldn't. I never would think of it. But yeah, this was given to me as a gift by somebody. And I want to thank you for that. And all of the other extraordinary little things. I got flags and hats along the way from my trip out to BC these past few weeks. And a note to all of the people, the wonderful people that I met at Universal Ostrich Farm, Katie and Karen, Jimmy, man, Keelley, Doug, Jody, Darcy, Shay, Bev, Julie. I didn't want to do this because I didn't want to forget anybody. Sherry, but I'm certain I have another Darcy, James, Jeff. You guys are absolutely awesome. And I want to thank you for making me feel so incredibly welcome for the entire time that I was there. I will be heading back for the weekend of July 11th through 13th. It's a huge Farm Aid event going on at Universal Ostrich Farm, and you can get all the details at farmaidcanada.com. farmaidcanada.com. Hopefully, we will see you there. I'm going to be the MC for that weekend. That's why I'm going back, because I promised that I would do it, and I'm a man of my word. So I'll see you there July 11th through 13th. And I'm going to drive it again. I know. But I'm going to drive it again. This time I'm going to take a different route going north through, well, not north, but central Manitoba, central Saskatchewan, central Alberta. So I'll be passing through Saskatoon, Yorkton, probably Dauphin, maybe Russell, Manitoba, Lloydminster. Hopefully I'll get to Mirror, Alberta this time to see our buddy Chris Scott, around Edmonton, then through Calgary, and on the way again to Edgewood, British Columbia. But that's not for a couple of weeks. Anyway, I just wanted to let you guys know. You know what? Instead of me telling you the good news, here's Jordan Keelley. He's the MLA for Peace River in British Columbia. Let him tell you.
It's been a little while since I've done an update on Universal Ostrich Farm, and they got some good news. They got a 30-day stay on the cull order by the CFIA, and now they can pursue their appeal. And they've got about a month to prepare for that appeal, and they have to go all the way to Ottawa. It's unreal that farmers, when it comes to trying to save their livelihood and their animals, have to go to this extent to where they actually start to spend over $200,000 in court costs. It blows my mind. There's a couple good things that right now they actually get a chance to submit all of their evidence and properly, and they've got a great lawyer, so I'm optimistic as to what the outcome might be. But right now, it's 171 days that the quarantine has been put in place. These birds are healthy and happy and dancing. There is no reason to cull them anymore. This is actually a moot point that the CFIA wants to kill these animals, and then it was blessed that it's gone this long without it happening, and the animals are still healthy. They're not spreading the disease. Right now, it's a great example of government overreach and old policies and procedures. The CFIA and the federal government need to look at what's best for farmers going forward and the different options that are available in being able to control scenarios like this.
Yeah, Jordan Keelley, the MLA, he's shown incredible support for Universal Ostrich Farm. He's the MLA for Peace River in British Columbia, and there are a few other politicians who are becoming brave enough or have already become brave enough to actually show their support and get behind this, because it's absolutely ridiculous what CFIA, Canadian Food Inspection Agency, is doing here. They're working off, and we explained this last Tuesday night on the show with Dr. Stephen Pellick, they are working off 6 months old PCR tests. They won't tell us what cycle rate they ran them at, but we guess to be about 36, which means you'll find anything that's ever been in that body. Anything, going all the way back to birth. Because that's how fine-tuned a PCR test can be. And that's exactly what the inventor of the PCR test said himself before he died of cancer, Dr. Kerry Mullis. The Shadow at Night live stream, as always, is brought to you by our friends Kevin and Anna at CanadaNanoSilver.com.
Silver is amazing. It has several natural health benefits, and it's been used for hundreds of years for health and healing. That's the main reason they made silverware from silver. But seriously, this Nano Silver from Silversuticals is the best and safest silver you can find. There are hundreds of studies and reports on it. I've read some of the studies myself, and it's mind-blowing. One of the things that sets Silversuticals apart is that it washes out of your body in 24 hours. No silver buildup and no turning blue. And it won't even harm the good bacteria your body needs. It's so effective they can use very small concentrations of silver, like 10 and 32 parts per million, and still outperform other silvers that have up to 3,000 parts per million. It's safer and more effective at the same time. It is an incredibly small particle that is small enough to work through your body, but big enough not to fall out of suspension. They infuse it into almost all of their products. It works in facial serums, toothpaste, gels, and even gummies that work to help your immune system.
It works, man. I use it all the time. CanadaNanoSilver.com, 204-808-9292. CanadaNanoSilver.com. All the science, all the research, all of the products are available on the website. I want to throw this up on the screen before it quickly vanishes because you guys comment a lot and it goes right past my face here, and I wanted to make sure that we got this up. Is this new, Calvin Colleen Cran? Because we're looking for incidents like this. It seems like CFIA is finding something new once a week somewhere in Canada. Fraser Valley, BC, 2 control zones after Newcastle. Oh, Newcastle, huh? Newcastle disease detected in 2 commercial poultry farms. Hasn't been an outbreak since 1973, and suddenly there is. Whoa! CFIA controlling movement of these birds. Of course they are. And you know what's happening next. You know, one of the big things about this Universal Ostrich Farm story is the fact that it's not just about Universal Ostrich Farm. Katie and Karen, the family have made it absolutely clear that they are trying to represent all farms that raise cattle or birds or hogs or whatever it is they do all across this country who are being unfairly picked on by CFIA and ordering culls Now, if you stay quiet and you're a good little boy or girl, you'll get compensation for it. But if you step up and you say something, well, that's a different story. Right now, because CFIA says Universal Ostrich Farm is not in compliance and refuses to work with the agency, that they will be getting no compensation for any of the ostriches they kill if they're allowed to do it. Can you believe that? 400 ostriches just. Oh, and by the way, we don't owe you a thing because you didn't want to work with us, when that is blatantly untrue. And there are the receipts to back that up. Anyway, let's get on with the show tonight. You guys remember last Thursday night when we had Councillor Lisa Robinson from Pickering, Ontario on the show? That was quite a show, actually. She revealed some new stuff that they're trying to do to her. And as of today, they have suspended her councillor's salary for the 5th time since she's been an elected official. Tomorrow night on the show, we're going to bring on Councillor Amber Harris of Gibbons, Alberta. This is a small community about 45 minutes to an hour north of Edmonton. And she's going through the same thing. The only difference being that Councillor Harris in Gibbons has been a councillor for the last 12 years. She knows the system in and out. She knows the people who are trying to screw her over. And she actually told me some horrifying things via text message this past weekend, which she's going to share with us all tomorrow night on the show. Councillor Amber Harris of Gibbons, Alberta. And then on Wednesday night, Dan Hartman, who lost his son Sean 4 years ago to the Movid vaccine. I'm not making light of that situation. I'm trying not to say the words because YouTube will go, psh, psh, see you later, done. Unbelievably, that kind of censorship is still going on in social media. I'm not so sure if it's happening anywhere else but Canada, but it is happening in Canada. All right, let's move on here. World War III. Donald Trump bombed Iran 3 times on Saturday night. We posted that on the Facebook page and on X. And so Iran fired back today. No casualties reported after Iran missile attack on U.S. base in Qatar. U.S. military presence in the Middle East. So let's scroll down here and see what we've got from Axios. Iran launched multiple missiles against an American military base in Qatar today in retaliation for the U.S. strike on its nuclear facilities this past weekend. Nuclear facilities, you say? Interesting. We're going to get to that too. No casualties reported. Both Qatar and the Trump administration were made aware of the Iranian attack ahead of time, sources tell Axios. What? We're going to bomb you. We're going to bomb you in 15 minutes, just so you know. Okay, good. It's unclear if the attack on Al Adid Air Base marked the full extent of Iran's retaliation. 3 hours after the attack, President Trump issued a statement thanking Iran for giving early notice for what he called a very weak missile attack. The president had previously warned that any retaliation would be met with force far greater than what was witnessed during the U.S. military attack against 3 Iranian nuclear sites over the weekend. But a White House official told Axios that Trump's goal now is to end the war. And he plans to make that clear to Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who's wanted this for 30 years now. We want a deal and we don't want any more war, the official said. Here is a report now from Fox News.
Trump has just made a statement. Rich Edson.
Good afternoon, Martha. So the president taking to Truth Social just a short while ago, he says Iran has officially responded to our obliteration of their nuclear facilities with a very weak response, which we expected and have very effectively countered. There have been 14 missiles fired. 13 were knocked down. 1 was set free because it was headed in a non-threatening direction. I am pleased to report that no Americans were harmed and hardly any damage was done. Most importantly, they've gotten it all out of their system, and there will hopefully be no further hate. I want to thank Iran for giving us early notice, which made it possible for no lives to be lost and nobody to be injured. Perhaps Iran can now proceed to peace and harmony in the region, and I will enthusiastically encourage Israel to do the same. Thank you for your attention in this matter.
Military official telling Fox no missiles reached the base and there were no casualties, as just quoted by President Trump. Neither detail seems to deter Tehran. They are suggesting, a senior official is at least, that they are not done with retaliation. But Trump might be. A military source telling the New York Post, quote, Trump has no intention of striking back after Iran's failed retaliation. Meantime, the New York Times, confirming what was just written by President Trump, reporting the officials said Iran symbolically needed to strike back at the United States, but at the same time carry it out in a way that allowed all sides an exit ramp. They described it as a similar strategy to 2020 when Iran gave Iraq heads up before firing ballistic missiles at an American base in Iraq following the assassination of its top general. That confirms what we just heard from President Trump, that there was warning before these missiles were launched at an American military base.
Can anybody explain to me why you would tell the country you're attacking that you're about to attack? Especially if you're retaliating against an attack that happened to you just 2 days previous? Is that one of the rules of the Geneva Convention or something? I've never heard of that one before. I don't know everything, but I do know some things. Jeffrey Sachs was making the rounds this past winter. He's a former advisor to several presidents in the White House, actually, and he's been talking about the Middle East quite a bit the last couple of years. A lot, as a matter of fact. And here he is back in January talking about the Middle East.
War in Syria. And you may actually hear from grown-up reporters who are lying through their teeth or ignorant beyond imagining that, oh, the war in Syria, yes, Russia intervened in Syria. Well, do you know that that Obama tasked the CIA to overthrow the Syrian government starting 4 years before Russia intervened? What kind of nonsense is that? And how many times did the New York Times report on Operation Timber Sycamore, which was the presidential order to the CIA to overthrow Bashar al-Assad? 3 times in 10 years. This is not democracy. This is a game. And it's a game of narrative. Why did the U.S. invade Iraq in 2003? Well, first of all, it was completely phony pretenses. It wasn't, oh, we were so wrong, they didn't have weapons of mass destruction. They actually did focus groups in the fall of 2002 to find out what would sell that war to the American people. Abe Schultzky, if you want to know the name of the PR genius. They did focus groups on the war. They wanted the war all the time. They had to figure out how to sell the war to the American people, how to scare the shit out of the American people. It was a phony war. Where did that war come from? You know what? It's quite surprising. That war came from Netanyahu, actually. You know that? It's weird. And the way it is that Netanyahu had from 1995 onward the theory that the only way we're going to get rid of Hamas and Hezbollah is by toppling the governments that support them. That's Iraq, Syria, and Iran. And the guy's nothing if not obsessive. And he's still trying to get us to fight Iran this day, this week. He's a deep, dark son of a bitch, sorry to tell you, because he's gotten us into endless wars, and because of the power of all of this in the U.S. politics, he's gotten his way. But that war was totally phony. So what is this democracy versus dictatorship? Come on, these are not even sensible terms.
Well, isn't that interesting? Back in January, Jeffrey Sachs. Have you guys ever heard of a guy called Stephen Faulconer? I only just discovered him today. Now, those of us who have done deep dives on what the hell's really going on over and over and over again, we might think that we know some things. I've seen some things. I've known some things. Look at me. This guy, and the way he speaks about it is so matter of fact, like he's known this since he was 10 years old or something. It all has to do with the language and who we think we're dealing with, and then who we think we're dealing with after that. But it's not as complicated as all of that. Boyd Anderson actually comes the closest, and maybe David Icke, to anybody I've ever heard speak regarding this particular situation that we're in. But this guy, Stephen Faulconer, we're going to run him tonight on the extension on shadowdavis.com. It's about an hour, maybe an hour and 10 minutes. I listened to it this afternoon, and I want to hear it again because this is like freaky stuff, man. Freaky stuff. Why did Donald Trump suddenly decide to bomb 3 nuclear sites in Iran? Apparently, they don't have any nuclear weapons. Richard Medhurst is a British reporter who's been covering the Middle East for the past 20 years. We're going to throw him up in just a second. Now, I will warn you that his report is about 17 minutes long. I edited it down from 25 minutes, and I thought, you know what, that's enough. It's long, but it's very, very good, and it's something we all need to hear. There's so many people who are commenting in the last 3 days on social media, absolutely, Iran can't be allowed to have nuclear weapons. Trump did the right thing. And it seems as though people are split on this issue, and of course, they're allowed to have their opinions, but they probably should be informed opinions, yeah? So, and why would Tulsi Gabbard just 2 months ago say, yeah, there's no nuclear weaponry in Iran at all? She said that in front of a joint congressional committee. And there's something about Tulsi Gabbard that I trust. I don't know what it is, even more than Donald Trump. I trust Tulsi Gabbard. And apparently she's walked that back since then. Why? I don't know. Did somebody get to her? Or did she see some other reports? I don't know. Here's a great piece from our friend Tom Marazzo. If Israel can have nukes, then why not Iran? Now, I know what you're thinking, but you've got to get this old think out of your head. That's probably the wrong way to put it. Things are not what they seem, at least in my opinion. Right? Do I support the tyrannical regime in Iran? Of course not. No. Do I support extreme Islam? Of course not. No. But fair is fair after all. And who's the one who's been causing all the ruckus in the Middle East since 1947? So Tom says, if Israel can have nukes, then why not Iran? A short guide to Western hypocrisy. For over 20 years, we've been told Iran is just days away from building a nuclear bomb. Remember the video I showed you of Netanyahu the other night? Always days. The longest countdown in modern history. Meanwhile, Israel already has them, not one, dozens. And not only is no one stopping them, they're encouraged, funded, and armed by the West. Israel never signed the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. Iran did. Yet somehow Iran is the problem. Let's use Israel's arguments and apply them to Iran. We have a right to defend ourselves. Of course you do. So does Iran. The country is surrounded by hostile American military bases, had its top general assassinated by a drone, and is constantly under threat of attack by Israel and the United States. Sounds like a perfect candidate for nuclear deterrence if you ask anyone with a map. We are a democracy. Democracy is not the golden ticket to own weapons of mass destruction, but even if it were, the United States works hand in hand with Saudi Arabia. So please, Tom says. Iran funds terrorists. The West calls them terrorists. Iran calls them allies. Israel calls its own armed settlers defenders. Everyone has their narrative. Just do not pretend yours is sacred while others are criminal. It's war, and it's politics. We cannot allow bad actors to get the bomb. The only country that's ever used an atomic bomb is the United States. Twice on civilians. And now the country that nuked cities across the ocean is telling a nation over 10,000 kilometers away that it's the threat. Meanwhile, Iran's nuclear program is by law and designed for civilian energy production. The country has been building nuclear power plants like the Bushehr reactor to modernize and supply electricity, not bombs, power. And unlike Israel, Iran actually signed the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty and allows regular inspections by the International Atomic Energy Agency. What did the inspector say? That Iran has no nuclear weapons program. That Iran's uranium enrichment, while advanced, is not weapons grade. That Iran is in technical compliance, or when out of bounds, still nowhere near a bomb. But here's the real kicker. The United States lied its way into war with Iraq. It claimed Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction. He didn't. They knew he didn't, but they said it anyway. Got the war they wanted, and then shrugged when no weapons of mass destruction were found. That lie destroyed an entire nation, and now they don't even bother lying anymore. They just declare enemies and expect obedience. They don't provide proof because there is no proof. They don't seek public support because they assume it. The new war narrative is pre-written and recycled. Israel likely handed Trump his talking points on Iran over a decade ago. He just needed to say them out loud when the time was right. And whether he was elected or selected, the agenda was clearly preloaded. His presidency became the mouthpiece for someone else's foreign policy. The rest is theater. So maybe Iran should build a bomb, not to use it, but to stop being bullied. Because if nukes are about self-defense, then Iran deserves one more than most. If nukes are about being taken seriously, then Iran should start building. After all, they have the right to exist, right? Here's Richard Medhurst talking about Iran's so-called nuclear program.
Nuclear deal was signed here in Vienna in 2015. It's called the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, or JCPOA. Iranians were in full compliance, so not my words, they're the IAEA's. Then after 3 years, in May 2018, Donald Trump quits the agreement and he reimposes sanctions on Iran. And so for a whole year after that, what do the Iranians do? They're still in full compliance. As a gesture of goodwill, in good faith, they keep applying the agreement for a whole year. Can you imagine you sign a contract with someone, they rip it up, and then you keep following the contract for an entire year? That shows how much the Iranians wanted to save the agreement, which capped uranium enrichment at 3.67%. So we get to May 2019, the Americans still won't come back to the agreement. So Iran announced a partial withdrawal. They say, you know what? Every 60 days that the United States doesn't lift sanctions, we're going to reduce our commitments under the nuclear deal. In the JCPOA, it literally says, under Article 26 and 27, that if the United States leaves the deal and reimposes sanctions, which is precisely what Trump did, Iran is not obliged to follow the agreement anymore. That's normal. And so the first step the Iranians take is to stop exporting their stockpiles of highly enriched uranium. July 2019, 60 days have passed. The Americans won't get back in the deal. Iran began enriching uranium from 3.67% to 5%. Their stockpiles of UF6, so that's hexafluoride, uranium hexafluoride gas, those stockpiles go past the 300 kilogram limit. Civilian use is 3.67%, okay? 5% is hardly that much further away. Nothing wrong with that. And the Iranians say, look, every 60 days, you don't get back in the deal. We're going to keep doing this because we've already waited a year and we didn't do anything differently. We waited a whole year for you to get back in the deal. It's a negotiation tactic. It's meant to put pressure on the Americans. It's leverage. It's not because they want to build a bomb. They just want sanctions relief. September 2019, another 60 days go by. Americans still won't get back in the deal. Trump won't lift the sanctions. So the Iranians say, okay, we're going to bring advanced IR4 and IR6 centrifuges online. And we're going to lift the limits that we placed on our research and development, R&D, of our advanced centrifuges. So centrifuges are basically these metal tubes that enrich uranium gas. They spin at a very high velocity. November 2019, another 60 days go by. The Americans still won't get back in the deal. What do the Iranians do? They bring more IR6 centrifuges online. The Fordow facility, which is one of the facilities they're trying to bomb right now, which is very deep in the mountains, that one begins enriching uranium to 4.5%. So before that, it was mainly being done at Natanz, which is the main enrichment site. 2 weeks later, the Iranians exceed the 130 metric ton limit on heavy water that was originally imposed by the JCPOA. But again, they're no longer bound by the deal now. January 2020, another 60 days go by. What does Donald Trump do? He goes and assassinates, he murders General Qasem Soleimani. He tricks him into coming to Baghdad for peace talks. Sound familiar, right? Pretending to engage in diplomacy, and then assassinates him in a drone strike. So after 2 days, the Iranians say, all right, you're out of your mind. The Iranian parliament, the Mejlis, pass a bill to limit their cooperation with the IAEA. Now, that bill was not ratified. However, the Iranians do remove the cap on the number of centrifuges that was originally placed by the JCPOA, which capped it at 5,060. So more centrifuges, more cascades, which are groups of centrifuges, are installed, and they begin enriching uranium at higher speeds and higher quantities. Once again, tit for tat, okay? It's not out of nowhere or out of the blue. It's always in response to Israeli and American aggression. July 2020, Israel bombs the Natanz nuclear facility. They sabotage it with explosives. November 2020, Mohsen Fakhrizadeh, who's considered the head of Iran's nuclear program, assassinated outside of Tehran by Israel with Donald Trump's blessing. The Iranians say, okay, you know what? Screw you. We're going to pass a bill in the Mejlis, in the Iranian parliament, to block snap inspections by the IAEA. And we're going to enrich uranium now, not to 4.5%, not to 5%, but to 20%. Again, tit for tat. You kill the head of our nuclear program, we're going to enrich uranium up to 20%. And what is the condition? They say, we're going to do this unless you give us sanctions relief, especially on the banking sector, particularly from the European Union and the E3, that's Germany, UK, France, who are all parties to the nuclear deal. Even after the West have blown up Iran's nuclear facilities, murdered their top military commanders and nuclear scientists, the Iranians are still trying to engage in diplomacy, saying, look, we can fix this. All you have to do is lift the sanctions. So again, look at the level of leniency, of mercy, of goodwill, of good faith, of that willingness to engage in actual diplomacy after everything that's happened. Other countries would have gone to war at this point already. February 2021, still no sanctions relief. So the Iranians suspend the additional protocol, the AP, and they end snap inspections. Now, remember, the Iranians haven't just signed the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, which is the NPT. They've also signed the additional protocol, the AP. They've also signed the JCPOA. That's 3 bloody deals. The NPT would have been enough on its own. They didn't need to do the others. And even the NPT they can withdraw from. And as a matter of fact, they're threatening to do that right now in response to Israel's war. So in February 2021, Iran, despite pulling out of the AP or ending the snap inspections, they strike a black box agreement with the IAEA. They say, look, we're not going to let you live stream from the facilities anymore because, yeah, Iran put cameras that the IAEA could watch all the way in Vienna. They had special tamper-proof seals on equipment and meters. The works. In addition, of course, to the snap inspections, right? But they say, we're not going to let you live stream anymore. We'll keep the cameras recording, and then we'll put the footage in a black box and give it to you after 3 months once you get Iran sanctions relief. If you don't get the West to lift sanctions, then you don't get the footage. We'll destroy it. Now, as far as I know, despite the fact the West never lifted sanctions, the Iranians have not destroyed any of that footage in the end, which goes to show you once again how lenient the Iranians have been and how much they tried to get the Americans back into the JCPOA, which capped their nuclear program at 3.67% enriched uranium. April 2021, Iran and the US begin indirect negotiations in Vienna. I covered those in detail. What do the Israelis do during the negotiations? Sound familiar? They go and bomb Iran's nuclear facility at Natanz. 1-5. This is an old tactic. The Americans are running cover, pretending to engage in diplomacy. The Israelis go and bomb. They do good cop and bad cop. That's the whole shtick. So they cut the power supply to the Cascades, and then they cut the backup generators as well. And when they do that, of course, the centrifuges, which are spinning very, very fast, have no time to cycle down and properly evacuate the hexafluoride uranium gas, the UF6 gas. So they snap, they break. What do the Iranians do? They replace the broken centrifuges with 164 IR6 centrifuges at Natanz, and they begin enriching uranium to 60%.
Which is still not weapons grade. That's Richard Medhurst, by the way. He is a British reporter who's been reporting on what's been going on in the Middle East for the last 20 years now. I know he doesn't look old enough, but he is. And he's pretty much one of the authorities on what is actually going on over there. So, what does that leave us with here? Well, Donald Trump says, I don't want any more war. Now is the time for peace. That's what he called for today, peace, even after bombing Iran for apparently no good reason on Saturday. So what happens next? Some people justifiably are on edge. Aside from all of the other concerns going on in their lives right now, locally, there's this, the specter of World War III hanging over our heads. What does this have to do with what's going on in Ukraine? I explained that on Thursday night on The Extension. Khazaria, the old Khazaria, is in the same spot that Ukraine is in today. I'm not going to go any further than that right now here on social media at the risk of getting banned and possibly attacked. And I wish I were kidding, but I'm not. What lies ahead for Europe, for the US, even for Canada for that matter? Well, we have had a lot of fighting-aged men streaming into our country these past 5 years. Europe has had way more than we've had, and the Americans as well. Here's Joseph Z.
And watch for with Iran now is retaliation. And you say, how can they? How can they retaliate? Here's the word. It's now going to be the watch time and the rise of the sleeper cells. This is what we got to really watch for here, because they're going to try to make problems in America in an unprecedented way. Can these be stopped? I believe so. Is it going to be difficult to stop them? Very.
Now, I'm not sitting here trying to alarm you. I'm not saying that that is absolutely going to happen. But they're here. Who created Israel anyway? I just saw in the comments, Kalergi plan or Kalergi. Was it the Rothschilds? No, we hear that way too often. So much so, as a matter of fact, that it's probably a conspiracy theory. I don't usually delve this deep into this stuff outside of the extension on the website. But tonight, I thought, there's a lot more to this than what the left-wing corporate media is telling us, or any politician for that matter. So here's an old interview with David Rothschild.
In modern Jewish history, and it begins with three
Make that Jacob Rothschild.
words. Dear Lord Rothschild.
Dear Lord Rothschild, I have much pleasure in conveying to you, on behalf of His Majesty's government, the following declaration of sympathy with Jewish Zionist aspirations, which has been submitted to and approved by the Cabinet.
Why was it that this letter was sent by the Foreign Secretary to your great-uncle Walter?
It's an interesting question because it was primarily a movement from Eastern Europe, but they didn't clarify who was in charge of that movement. And in addition, it was, after all, in Great Britain. So they felt that the Rothschild family should be the one to whom it was addressed. And Walter was Lord Rothschild, and he was a Zionist. And those really are the background reasons.
So Walter received the Balfour Declaration, and I have a copy here. And I wonder if I could possibly ask you to read it for us.
Yes, indeed. Yeah. I'm going to put on my spectacles to make sure I read it accurately. His Majesty's government view with favour the establishment of Palestine as a national home for the Jewish people, and will use their best endeavours to facilitate the achievement of this object, it being clearly understood that nothing shall be done which may prejudice the civil and religious rights of existing non-Jewish communities in Palestine, or the rights and political status enjoyed by Jews in any other country. I should be grateful if you would bring this declaration to the knowledge of the Zionist Federation. Yours, Arthur Balfour.
And here it is, the Balfour Declaration. What do you feel when you see it here?
I genuinely feel it's one of the most extraordinary moments in the history of the Jewish people. If you think it took 3,000 years to get to this, and then you say, how did this miracle happen? It's the most incredible piece of opportunism. I mean, if you think you had an impoverished would-be scientist, Chaim Weizmann, who somehow gets to England, meets a few people, including members of my family, seduces them. He has such great charm and conviction. He gets to Balfour, and he unbelievably persuades Balfour and Lloyd George, the Prime Minister, and most of the ministers, that this idea of the national home for Jews should be allowed to take place. I mean, it's so unlikely. And then he's, starts to fight a difficult battle with the British cabinet, and this letter goes through 5 drafts, as you know. And in the end, it comes out as a rather compromising letter. I mean, the essential point is there for the Jewish community to fasten on to. You have the first bit, which promises a national home rather than the national home. And then you have the bit that nothing that's to be done should in any way harm the Arab community. But you come back to the big point, which is that this is perhaps the greatest event in Jewish life for thousands of years.
Nothing should be done to harm the Arab community. Now, I've seen in the comments here, they're all Freemasons. I've often wondered the connection. Can't sit here and say things we just don't know for sure. But after watching this thing with Stephen Falconer this afternoon, which we're going to do on the extension tonight at shadowdavis.com. If you're not a member, become one. You're going to go. It's going to be like, remember the Bugs Bunny cartoons? When Sylvester the cat was surprised by something, his jaw would come down and then it would go hanging in the breeze like that. That's how your jaw is going to be tonight. Mine was. I only just got it back in place 3 minutes before the show started tonight. Hello, Corinne, by the way. How are you? So, okay, so I'm going to throw this up on the screen here. And I will say that you're getting warmer, Doc. You're getting warmer. Remember I said that Boyd Anderson was closest to it? What word did he use constantly? Do you guys remember the interview? Well, several interviews we've done with Boyd, and we got to bring him on again soon. Jesuit. Yeah. They're real, man. And that Tom Hanks movie from like 25 years ago, what was it? The Da Vinci Code? Yeah. Oh, yeah. Now, getting back to, and I'm not going to say that this was that, but getting back to these sleeper cells that dude was talking about a few minutes ago. Let me throw this up here. Even though France had nothing to do with this attack over the weekend, I think that the Middle Eastern world and the Muslim world, Sunni Muslims in particular, probably hold the United States, Canada, Europe, Australia, all the Western world under the same sort of curtain, right? We're all the West. We're all the enemy. All European descent. All of that. And so at a Paris music festival, chaos. 145 pricked in syringe attack, reportedly 1,500 injured. This comes from Vigilant Fox. Millions were in the streets across France Saturday for a music festival known as the Fête de la Musique, when chaos broke out in the streets with reported brawls, clashes with police, stabbings, leaving hundreds or thousands injured. 145 people were reportedly assaulted in so-called syringe attacks, with the suspected intention being to intoxicate one with the date rape drug. Now, it could be anything. Anything. A local mayor said the festival had broken all attendance records as the FC Metz soccer team was playing in a playoff match. Per France 24, nearly 150 people reported being assaulted with syringes across France during its annual Fête de la Musique summer festival, with Paris police reporting 13 cases in the capital alone. 12 suspects in the attacks were arrested. The Interior Ministry said more than 370 other people were detained nationwide on various other charges. Additionally, unconfirmed reports circulating on social media suggest there was massive violence, leaving 1,500 injured. Per Remix News, 6 were stabbed, with 1 in critical condition, 371 arrested, 13 police officers injured, 51 cars were set ablaze, 1,500 injured. A little bit concerned with this whole syringe attack thing, if that becomes a tactic used by whatever. I mean, summertime is the time for music festivals, man. Thousands of people gathering. How easy would that be? And what about China? You guys know who Eric Bethel is? Here's a little biography on him. Eric Bethel is a global finance professional, experience in the private and public sectors. In 2020, he was nominated to serve as the U.S. ambassador to the Republic of Panama. Previously, he was nominated by the president, confirmed unanimously by the Senate to represent the U.S. at the World Bank. At the World Bank, Mr. Bethel participated in the analysis and deployment of over $100 billion of capital in the developing world through grants, loans, equity investments, and other financial products. And earlier in his career, Mr. Bethel worked as an investment banker and private equity professional focused on emerging markets. He was on the Sean Ryan podcast a couple of days ago talking about China.
His embassy in the U.S. right around the time when we were starting to talk about tariffs. If war is what the U.S. wants, be it a tariff war a trade war, or any other type of war, we're ready to fight till the end. When you've stored 70% of the world's corn, why do you do that? When you've built enormous hospitals in Fujian province across from Taiwan, why do you do that? What began in 2021 with 1 brigade has now reached 42 brigades.
If we get into a conventional conflict with China right now, we will suffer calamitous levels of casualties.
We can't build stuff anymore. Why? Why do we depend on China for things that are very critical to our survival? Pharmaceuticals, antibiotics, penicillin, these are things that we should not outsource.
Telecom, phones.
A scary conversation at breakfast.
China preparing to take over the world. Same thing we do every week, Pinky. You see, this is why it's tough to figure out. When you've got the Jesuits, and you've got the Masons, who I believe are the same thing, just by different names. And then there's things I can't say here on social media that I can't say on the extension. But it's so difficult to make your way through all of this information and come up with some kind of a coherent plan as to who's actually behind all of this. Of course, I said this on the extension the other night. I said, man, when we find out, if we ever do, which I doubt, but let's just say that we do find out one day before we die, we're going to go, oh, man, really? That was it? That was all? Just these guys? That's what it was the whole freaking time? These guys? Come on, man. It's probably something that simple. Canada signed a new deal today with the EU. Not a surprise, with Mark Carney as Prime Minister. Canada and the European Union opened a new era of transatlantic cooperation today by signing a security and defense partnership at a joint summit in Brussels. So we're working with the EU now as they ramp up their military production, spending $1 trillion to get there so they can defend Ukraine. That's what this is about. It's about Ukraine. The agreement commits Canada and Europe to collaborating on defense and is a step toward Canada participating in the continent's massive new defense procurement program known as Rearm Europe. Carney, who traveled to Brussels for the EU-Canada summit, is pursuing more options for defense procurement as Canada seeks to reduce its trade and security reliance on the United States. So, let me get this straight. If we do get attacked by somebody, then Europe is going to come all the way from over there across the Atlantic, as opposed to the Americans saying, hey, man, we're right here. You need some help. We're going to build trading relationships, like-minded partners. Mark Carney, right? We're going to start calling him Mark 2 times because he repeats everything. Reliable partners, like-minded partners. Carney told a news conference after the summit. And he also said something else I found disturbing today. Why is it that all of these world leaders, the ones, over there on the left, way over there on the left, why they always have to get the phrase New World Order or something like it into a speech to the world? Well, the old world order is not working. Time for a new world order. Here's Mark Carney just today.
It's more dangerous and divided. A time where the rules-based international, the global order, rules-based global order is under threat, in a time when technological change is accelerating. And we really have two choices as a jurisdiction, as a country in this circumstance. We can nostalgically look back and long for the old order to somehow return, or we can build a new one with purpose and partnership. And as the most European of the non-European countries, Canada looks first to the European Union. And so today, this is a new era of cooperation. Our strategic Canada-EU or EU-Canada strategic partnership for the future will build a new and deeper relationship that brings us closer together. But now we're working alongside the European Union to combat climate change, to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals, and to protect, as the most European,
just a minute, the most European of non-European countries.
Somehow return, or we can build a new one with purpose and
New World Order
partnership. And as the most European of the non-European countries, Canada looks first to the European Union. And so today, this is a new era of cooperation. Our strategic Canada-EU or EU-Canada strategic partnership for the future will build a new and deeper relationship that brings us closer together. But now we're working alongside the European Union to combat climate change, to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals, and to protect, amongst other things, academic and scientific freedoms.
You run across a credit card yet that gives you a climate footprint? Or have you flown in the last 3 years and they've told you what your climate output would be on that flight? It's getting more widespread. It's becoming a bigger and bigger and bigger thing. Even though it stopped for a while under Trump, Carney, with his GFONS buddies, wants to rekindle that, and that is one of the reasons that this union is happening. Canada, EU. Climate change, climate change, climate change, green economy, billions and billions and billions of dollars. It's all about the money. It's all about control. It's all about power. Listen to what this guy says.
You weren't warned. MasterCard and the United Nations are joining forces to monitor the carbon effect of your credit card purchases. And then you'll hit your carbon max and it'll stop working. Hey, of course it's voluntary for now. The new credit card is called Doconomy. And on the back of the card, it's going to say, I am taking responsibility for every transaction I make to help protect the planet. This is a social credit score, and it's a proof of concept. The Doconomy CO2 credit card website claims it is the largest initiative ever taken by a bank in educating its users on the impact of consumption. They say themselves they want to set a global standard for carbon calculations. That's the key. Once they have their numbers in place, then they can give every single purchase you make a score and punish you directly. This is what China does. And of course, this will only be enforced on you and me and any businesses that don't go along with their scheme. And banks are going to enforce it.
What the World Economic Forum has is that there are going to be people that will not comply. Their biggest fear is your fight for freedom. Their biggest fear is that you will make individual decisions for yourself and you will not follow their orders. So this digital stuff is absolutely key, because without it, they can't enforce anything. Without it, they can't mandate that you do something. Without it, they can't control your life. So I don't care if you're talking about carbon emissions and what's safe and effective as far as they are concerned. I don't care if they're talking about an experimental injection, a series of injections, whatever they may be, and what's safe and effective as far as they're concerned. This is not about those individual things. This is about the desire to control you from the outside in. And if they have a digital process whereby they can restrict your movement, your behavior, and your decisions with the click of a button, you are done.
Well, let's not get crazy. You're not done. You're just going to have to learn to live off the grid. This is something we've been talking about now for the past 4 years. If you've been with me that long, you have heard conversations on this show just like that. And there are cells all across Canada where people have been preparing for just this eventuality for just about that amount of time, maybe longer. They're even making their own gasoline, for goodness sakes. The time is coming. This is 2025. This is Agenda 2030. And if you'll recall, a couple of years ago, they sped up that timeline, make it more like Agenda 2028. We might be 2 or 3 years from it in whatever shape it takes. Question is, what are you going to do? Do you want to be a part of that? No. Can you live outside of that? Maybe. They're going to make it very difficult. The time is coming, my friends. The time is coming to think about what you're going to do, how to protect your wealth, all of these things. Where are you going to live? You're going to be able to live in the same house in a smart city where you can only travel certain roads on certain days if you have a certain kind of car? It's coming down, man. And Mark Carney is going to accelerate it. That's why he was installed as prime minister. And let's face facts, he was installed. There is absolutely no debating that at this stage of the game. What about all those people that have been brought into this country? They're bragging about it on social media now, and they're telling their friends from the Middle East or India or Pakistan, hey, this is what you get if you come to Canada as a refugee. Watch.
No, you can get up to 82,000 Canadian dollars from Canadian government for doing nothing. Yes, I am talking about refugees. If you become refugee in Canada, they will pay you up to $224 per day. That is $140 for accommodation and around $84 for food, and that too are tax-free. So it means around $82,000 a year. It looks like a paid vacation to me, or it looks like free money to me. And in addition to this, an average Canadian earns up to 63,000 Canadian dollars in a year, and he pays over 20% in taxes. Then if he buys something, he has to pay 15% again. Although refugee has to pay that, and there are a lot other things that Canadian has to suffer. So become a refugee in Canada and get up to $82,000 free for the whole year.
I can see that many people in comments are very upset by all of this, and that was not my intention. Never is on this show. I mean, all I want to do is inform you guys. Just want to keep you guys in the loop as to what's going on. One of my big questions is, though, and I have this conversation with, I don't know, so many people almost every single day. How come nobody's doing anything about it? Well, I think the first person I heard say this was Chris Sky, and that was maybe 4 years ago, maybe even 5 years ago now. And he said simply this: just say no. And you cannot vote your way out of this. You will never vote your way out of this. So what are you going to do? And I'm not sitting here encouraging violence. I am encouraging more demonstration, more speaking out, not staying silent about this. And I totally understand the browbeating that you could take at a kitchen table if you bring this stuff up. That's why you got to go armed with facts. You got to be able to reason with these people. Just get them to see what the hell's going on in this world right now, in this country. And if they want to stop it, they're going to have to stand up too before it's too late. In some cases, it already is. Maybe it can be reversed, though. We seem to be making some headway in the pipeline game anyhow. Maybe Danielle Smith. And I know there's a lot of people that don't like Danielle Smith because they think that she's one of them, a wolf in sheep's clothing. But I think that she's handcuffed by certain forces inside her own party that make her life extremely difficult. And she has to negotiate her way around all of those pitfalls and trapdoors if she wants to do any good at all. And I get that there are people saying, how come she doesn't do something about AHS? How come she doesn't do something about this? How come she's saying that? Why did she support C5? Why did she have a Section 1 built into the new Alberta Bill of Rights? I get it. I know. It seems like she takes 2 steps forward and then 1 step back. Does she support Alberta independence, or does she see a strong independent Alberta within a united Canada? Whatever that's supposed to mean. I have no idea. But still, in my opinion, she is the only politician in this entire country who's managed to have an impact in terms of what he or she can do and what they're willing to do, or even say publicly. Poilievre was like that, and then the election campaign happened. Danielle Smith touts Alberta Supremacy at Rotary International Convention in Calgary. Alberta Supremacy? What does that mean? Smith is a former Rotarian herself. She described Alberta as Canada's economic engine, and she's not wrong. She welcomed thousands of Rotary International delegates to Calgary Sunday, using the stage to tout Alberta's economic strength, energy, ambitions, and approach to addiction recovery. More than 15,000 Rotary members from more than 120 countries are expected to gather in Calgary this week for the Rotary International Convention, a 5-day event that runs through Wednesday at Stampede Park. Well, that's fantastic. What about the Transmountain pipeline? They're eyeing pipeline capacity increase by early 2027 because it's teetering on the brink right now. Is it running at capacity? Well, it's running at between 80 or 90%, which essentially is capacity. Not according to David Eby, the Premier of British Columbia. Danielle Smith wants new pipelines built. She wants to get rid of that tanker ban on the North Shore of BC. But David Eby, well,
that I have as a matter of priorities. You know, we have a taxpayer-funded pipeline, the TMX pipeline. It's owned by Canadians. It's not operating at capacity. There's 200,000 additional barrels of capacity in that pipeline. Let's start there. I don't support tens of billions of dollars in federal subsidy for a brand new pipeline across the north, getting rid of the tanker ban off the north coast. When we have major projects in BC and in Alberta with private companies that are advancing them, that are ready to work, ready to dig, ready to employ people, ready to diversify our trade relationships. Why would we prioritize a massive public spend like that when more limited public spend could deliver additional capacity through the pipeline we already own? And so many projects that are ready to go with actual proponents. I've said very clearly to Premier Smith that if she's able to arrange that, then we're happy to sit down with Alberta and have that conversation with them about what that would look like. But let's be honest with ourselves. We have a $36 billion pipeline that's publicly owned that the federal government cannot sell. It's not even operating at capacity. There is not a world.
Yes, it is operating at capacity. You need to have some vacancy in there. That's how it works. It is this close to capacity. If it's not, and coming in a year, it will be over capacity. Can you build a pipeline in a year? I don't think so. So maybe get started now.
In which that pipeline across the north happens without significant federal subsidy. If the Premier of Alberta is able to pull that off, I say more power to her. Let's sit down and have that conversation.
So yeah, it's time for Alberta independence. It is absolutely past time for Alberta independence. And here's an article written by our buddy Donald Lee from Druthers. Druthers, my friends. Druthers.ca. Alberta independence. This will be the last story of the night before we go to the extension, which will be available tonight on shadowdavis.com and possibly in the Telegram group, the Shadow at Night community. If you're not a member of that group, I say go and join up. That's where we have our conversation while we're watching the extension. And tonight's extension, you guys, Stephen Falconer, ooh, it's going to be like diving into a different dimension. Everything you thought you knew, you don't. Secession is not enough, Donald says. Everyone's talking about Alberta separation, but no one is talking about the most important issues. Yes, Alberta needs to secede from Canada. No, secession will not solve the problem. Let me explain, he says. It's the empire of the St. Lawrence. You've heard the Laurentian elite? Well, this is what he's talking about. Most Canadians think their region is constantly left out of any real political decision-making or political influence in our country. That's not surprising. Although we call it such, Canada has never been a confederation, a political union of sovereign states for purposes of common action, where the federal government has limited power and the individual states retain significant sovereignty and autonomy. In practice, Canada's always been an empire of the St. Lawrence. People often refer to the Laurentian elites, but these people don't come from the hills. They come from the plains, from that geographical region of Canada that we learned in junior high school to call the St. Lawrence Lowlands. It's the Toronto, Ottawa, Montreal axis lying along the St. Lawrence River. Canada's always been ruled from this axis. Power has always been tightly held and has become increasingly centralized over the years. There's never been any equality in Canada. Every other part of Canada is functionally a colony of the empire of the St. Lawrence. And even today, it's really a branch plant of the British Crown. Ooh! 30 years ago, the Reform Party arose in Alberta with the slogan, "The West wants in." That was true. Alberta wanted to become a full partner in a real confederation, no longer a colony of the empire. A decade later, that hope was crushed. It was the old totalitarian tactic of rule or ruin. The empire of the St. Lawrence couldn't ruin the Reform Party, so they ruled it. They merged it with the Progressive Conservative Party, and reform ideas ceased to exist. The West didn't get in, got crushed into subservience again. What the West wants today is the same equal treatment it's wanted for my whole life, from Peter Lougheed to Ralph Klein to Danielle Smith. In fact, what the West wants hasn't changed since the days of Louis Riel. The empire's response hasn't changed either. We're always crushed. Gradually, people in the West are realizing that equal treatment is impossible. We cannot get in. Our only alternative is to get out. Exactly how and in what form shall we get out? And will that really solve our problems? To answer those questions, one must understand the real problem. This is where the greatest confusion lies. This is not politics, it's war. That sounds absurd. Yes, it's true. Readers of Druthers understand that we've been fighting a war at least since the beginning of the COVID operation 5 years ago. Most Albertans think they're looking for a political solution to a political problem, but the real problem is more fundamental. The real problem is totalitarianism. Until we're willing to understand and admit that we will never solve our problems, we're in a war of democracy against totalitarianism. It's confusing because nobody is dropping bombs on us. The Chinese call this unrestricted warfare. The Americans call it fifth generation warfare. I call it war is everything. Everything is war. Nobody is using guns, but everything else has been weaponized. That's what unrestricted warfare is all about. That's what China's doing. That's what the deep state is doing. We're experiencing a war of totalitarianism against all of humanity. What we see happening in Alberta today is happening everywhere in the world. We have an opportunity to not only create something beautiful in Alberta, but to be a beacon of light to the whole world. We must also understand that we're not really fighting Ottawa. The COVID campaign proved beyond a shadow of a doubt that policies are being made at some level above the level of national governments. It's not Justin Trudeau who's behind this. It's not Mark Carney. These people are just fronts for people or forces behind them. We are, in fact, not fighting against people at all. Our battle is against ideas and, by extension, against ideologies. All the structures in our society have been weaponized against us. This war is being conducted through the very structures of government and all social structures that we thought were democratic, but they've all been corrupted and turned into tools of dictatorship. That's part of why I say that in this war we win not by attacking anything or anyone, but by creating. We need to create a new form and structure of government. When we do this, the war will be over. Our adversary will have lost its power. The solution to dictatorial power is not to change the dictator, but to remove that power. Decentralization must replace the centralization of power. We cannot win this war by simply separating Alberta into a new country with the same form and structure of government. Our provincial government is already captured and controlled just like all the other provincial and municipal governments. These are already acting as dictatorships. If we separate Alberta into a new country with the same provincial government, we'll simply replace the Ottawa tyranny with an Edmonton tyranny. This is the same issue faced by the American colonies in 1776. We need to go back to the drawing board and rethink how we organize ourselves in society. I say we need 1776 thinking. At that time, the American colonists wanted out from under the tyrannical king, but they realized that they couldn't just set up a new monarchy in America to replace the old monarchy in England. That wouldn't solve the problem. They needed to create a new form and structure of government that would guarantee liberty and that could not be corrupted. They did a very good job. The founding documents of the United States of America created a form and structure of government that was new and unique in history. But now we find that even this has been corrupted, as has every other government structure in the Western world. So we must begin again. We must learn from the past and once again create a form and structure of government that will be immune to corruption and tyranny, one that's not top-down. We need bottom-up structures where power and responsibility are pushed down to the lowest levels possible. That means personal freedom and responsibility. This begins with the sovereign individual, then the sovereign family, then the sovereign community. Communities can then join together into provinces if we wish to retain that name, and provinces can join together into nations if we wish to retain that name and concept. This is where most people will rebel at the very idea. Canadians do not want responsibility. The majority of Canadians want to be taken care of by the government. This was succinctly captured in a recent message from David Parker. Because here is the dark truth. Most Canadians would rather be comfortable than free. They would rather feel safe than be sovereign. Just look at how people scream at the thought of losing their government pension, their government Medicare, their welfare, or unemployment insurance. None of these programs are actually the responsibility of any level of government. These are all individual responsibilities. This is exactly why I've written about transforming ourselves as individuals before we can transform our communities and nation. I'm reminded of the prophetic words of Ludwig von Mises, the greatest economist of the 20th century. He wrote, "The fate of civilization rests upon the ideas that motivate the masses. If we fail to win the battle of ideas, we'll see the horrors of history repeated." Today, almost everyone holds socialist ideas without even knowing it. This is exactly what cultural Marxism is all about. We've been infiltrated. Canadians will never willingly accept responsibility and thus freedom. This is what will prevent our ultimate victory in this war. We will be defeated and most of us massacred unless we're able to convince our brothers and sisters that our choice is between responsibility and death. Choose poorly and we'll have death by default. Your mission, if you choose to accept it, is to start a real and serious discussion about the form and structure of government, not simply about Alberta independence. If Alberta secedes and retains its present structure of government, it will be a deep state victory. Divide and conquer. Clearly, the deep state wants Canada to tear itself apart, to bring in the one world totalitarian government they're planning. They must destroy nation states. Alberta must secede, yes. But at the same time, we must restructure government. In fact, all of society to become truly democratic. The deep state does not fear any of the existing nation states because they've already infiltrated and controlled them. But the deep state does fear true democracy. Only democracy will defeat their totalitarianism. Once power is not centralized, it cannot be monopolized, and the people cannot be controlled. Our future lies in the decentralization of all power. If we fail to do that, we have no future. That from Donald Lee, who's been on the show a couple of times. He's an author and a speaker from Alberta. His recent books, What the Hell is Going On and The Way Forward, explain what's really going on in our world. And that article can be found on druthers.ca or whenever you get druthers delivered to your mailbox. And that's it for the show tonight, you guys. I want to thank you for being here. Vicky, Alana, Marty, Carol. I forgot to say hello, you guys, tonight. I'm sorry. I knew I was forgetting something all the way through the show. I went, dude, you forgot something. And of course, it was saying hello. Shadow at Night live stream, as always, is brought to you by Canada Nano Silver, CanadaNanoSilver.com. Go check out their awesome products. And if you have questions, the science, you can get a hold of Kevin and Anna through the contact tab in the upper right corner of the front of the website, or their phone number is there as well. Just give them a call. The extension is coming up in just a second. Stephen Faulkner is going to talk about what's really going on. At least he's as close as I've ever seen come to getting what's really going on in the world right now. That's on the extension starting in 2 minutes. I love you all. I appreciate you all. And I will catch you tomorrow night, 8 o'clock Central, for another one. Bye for now.